we all know that there's a whole emotional level and relational level that is involved in dealing with institutional transformation, and especially churches.
Yeah.
I have seen you in the room with church leadership teams and a lot of conflict and fear
Mm,
and
mm,
grief. You know, your tool and your work is about data and statistics and areas that we can take opportunities. How do you pastor your way through
mm,
a, a digital tool like this
Hmm.
and help people with their grief and pain?
Well, I think it's really important that to continue to say, we are a Christian group, and that resurrection always follows death. That's part of it.
mm,
And whether that's death of our expectations, death of our hope, what we were hoping would come. For so many of our churches, they are hoping for this new heir to come, or the heir that they had
mm.
expectations about. But that's a very, very biblical thing, right? Like over and over, the people of Israel or families in the Bible were hoping for this specific heir, and they had to look this way to come and take over the legacy, or take over Israel, or take over Abraham's family line. And always God brought somebody or something that was completely unexpected. And so this is
Mm.
something that's not just to us now, but it has always been. And so even though in most cases it will not be our children and grandchildren coming to take over our role as head of the board in our church, which we were hoping for, or to lead worship in our church, it will be somebody or something else if we are open to that. And that's God's spirit. And so I think that's the hope, is that we're giving them the opportunity to say something's going to come, but we have to be open to. So that's part of it. That the data gathering is really about listening. What is actually able to happen? How do we open ourselves up, not just spiritually, but organizationally and functionally, in order to hear God's spirit? I think that's a good part. The other thing too is that we part of our thing is that we have the congregation, as part of our tool, is to rank what we call the organizational values. Oftentimes conflict comes over when we have
Mm.
in church, we have very use very abstract language to talk about our most important things: evangelism, discipleship, reaching children. However, because it's still on the abstract, it allows us to imbue different feelings into that. One of the things that we bring out really clearly is we say that the the, the actual values that guide churches and these types of decisions about the future are the ones that happen in the parking lot by usually the one or two men after the meeting, those business people, yeah,
Mm.
that former attorney or whoever that is. And when we talk about those values, long-term financial stability, how important Sunday morning service is, um, what our legacy is to the community, what kind of partnerships we have, people needs. It kind of depersonalizes some of those discussions. We're not going to change the culture of the church, but we want to change how they function in order that they can be open to what happens next. So I think that that's kind of part of it, is that we're not trying to not hear the conversations. I mean, the grief and the listening, that's so important. But whoever is guiding them, that's why we like to train people to do it. Whoever is guiding them has to be aware of the hope of the future, but they need to hear this. I think the other thing too, and this is part of the challenge for so many of us, is that in many of these cases, the churches will actually die. But to be
Mm.
really clear about that, to be able to say to our congregation, you actually only have a 2-year window left. And how do we pause for a second and we let God's Spirit actually move in that moment and say, well, what about resurrection then? What
Mm.
could happen out of that? Because they obviously will need to process that. And so that's part of our process too, is that we create these conversations so that the the churches can, and people alongside, can walk alongside of them to have these really important and challenging conversations. But some of them won't be. Some of them, like, based on the kinds of data that we have about your property, or based on what your property and all these other things, um, you're so attractive to everyone. People are knocking on the door to renovate you and to make something new out of this, and you will have families in here for the next, 3 generations or whatever that is. But until they know what the realities or possibilities are, it's the anxiety of what they feel like they don't see that's driving the conversation.